Hi everyone, Heather here with astrologywithheather.com, and I am back with another forecast for the month ahead with Robert Phoenix. Hi Robert.
Hi Heather, nice to be
Thank you.
here.
Yeah, it's nice to be here too. And we're back, you guys. I told you guys we'd be back. We missed last month because there was a little bit of chaos going on my end, but I wanted to make sure that we got together again, and so that way we could talk about what's coming up this next month, because we have, Mercury retrograde and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. So yeah. So how are you doing?
I'm great. It's great to be back, and I just feel like there's a ton of stuff happening, cosmically right now. So many people are going through really fast, highly accelerated changes. I think a lot of it has to do with the Jupiter-Uranus action that we've been seeing over the course of the last couple of weeks. And people are expanding with Jupiter and Sagittarius. They're expanding what they can do, what they think they can do. People have an opportunity to move past their limitations with this Jupiter and Sagittarius aspect for the entire year. And I think it's incredibly exciting. Now that Jupiter has gotten past Neptune, it's no longer really in that exact square with Neptune. We can, kind of get a handle on things. It's a bit less kind of foggy and a bit less sort of hype. It's less hype and kind of more boiled down and distilled into this place where we can really grasp something real, something authentic, and something profound in our lives, because Jupiter and Sagittarius is profound, and it's pushing out, in all sectors. I talked about this on my show the other night, and this is in relationship to illusion, where there's illusion in our society or where there's illusion in our lives. Because Jupiter and Sagittarius is expansive, it's pushing out in those areas. And so what happens is that stuff is going to come to the surface, just due to the fact that we're all dealing with this very expansive and open and really powerful and profound energy. And I love it. I think it's great. I got Jupiter and Sagittarius anyway, but I think it's great for everybody. And grasp the rose. This is a great time for change. And don't let the conditions of the world or some of the illusion drag you down, because a lot of that stuff just isn't real. So this is a great time, and I'm really looking forward to what we come up with today.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's a great point too, because a lot of people are having trouble with, we're having Saturn starting to form a conjunction with Pluto in the South Node right now. And so a lot of people are focusing on their fears and anxieties and all of this sort of really intense energy around the structures in their lives that they're like holding onto right now that seem to be, starting to crumble or unravel for whatever reason. And so, on the flip side of that, we also have Jupiter in Sagittarius, which is helping us to have a sense of perspective, so we can sort of see things from that broader perspective, have a little bit of optimism about what's going on here, so we can kind of make sense of it from a more philosophical Sagittarian level, right? So it's like, on one hand, there's difficulty going on. Some people are going through some hardship. People are having to surrender old structures, old paradigms, old ways of being, and that can be really difficult and traumatic for people sometimes. But I do see, especially because a lot of people are having Saturn squares to their planets at the same time that Jupiter's trining, right? Because we have this energy of the cardinal energy and then the fire sign energy. So people are having these energies of like having to restructure things and having to deal with that at this time. But then they have the Jupiter trines that are actually helping them to maintain that optimism, maintain that energy to actually push through and see it through, because sometimes Saturn can suppress your energy, right? And it can cause you to feel like fatigued and like you don't have the stamina to keep going. But Jupiter's helping us right now. So
that's a really interesting point. We can look at the baby boomers, and they're going through that version because they've got Saturn and Pluto opposing. There's about a 7-year section in there where they have Uranus and Cancer, right? So they've got Saturn and Pluto opposing Uranus and Cancer, and they've got Jupiter trining Pluto and Leo. And even if they don't have Uranus and Cancer, maybe they're really early boomers and they've got Uranus and Gemini, or they're late and they may have Uranus and Leo. They're still going to have that Jupiter trine to Pluto. If you go into Gen X, now Gen X is having a very interesting time because they've got Pluto and Libra. So we've got Pluto square Pluto and Saturn square Pluto. So this is where Gen X is really starting to come into middle age, and they're trying to understand and unravel what's going on in their life, meaning, relationships, all those things that are really bundled up in that Gen X package. And some of them actually have like Neptune in Sagittarius. So to your point, a second there. To your point,
my dogs are fighting in the background.
3 seconds out of motion. But to your point, here comes Jupiter, right, in Sagittarius, beginning to conjunct or conjuncting their natal Neptunes, where there is really the potential for very expansive and very positive spiritual traction in their life, to be uplifted, in whatever way, whether it's through nature, whether it's through their relationship with God, or however they're moved, right? There's the potential for that while they're being hit with that T-square, which is exactly what you're talking about. Now the millennials are having a very interesting time, because Saturn and Pluto, for the most part, are crossing their Saturn or their Neptune, and their Uranus, right? Neptune
and some of their Saturns too.
Some of their Saturns. So the millennials are having a very interesting time, and it's fascinating. Whether you agree with them or not, it's fascinating to see somebody like Ocasio-Cortez or Ilhan Omar. They're right at the crest of that millennial wave, and you can see that they are shaking things up. Whether you like them or not, whether you believe in what they're saying, some of it may have some truth, some of it may be totally whacked out, but they are shaking things up. And I think this is really the first wave of what we're going to see with the millennials over the next couple of years, when Saturn eventually moves out of Capricorn. So very interesting time, super interesting time.
Yeah, that is interesting. And like thinking about those types of players too, like they're making changes and things like that, but they're having a very difficult time. They're coming against that Saturnian opposition, right?
They're hitting this status quo.
Yeah.
Like they're hitting the old status quo, and the South Node is in Capricorn. And it's really been fascinating to kind of watch that in action. Whatever you think of Ilhan Omar, she did this thing last week where she got Elliot Abrams. Elliot Abrams is an old school spook, right? He's a neocon. He's an old school spook. He was involved in Iran-Contra. I mean, if you want a hatchet man to pull off an international job somewhere, Elliot Abrams is your guy. I mean, he was convicted, right? He was convicted of, coloring outside the lines. Well, the Trump administration is bringing Elliot Abrams in to go deal with Venezuela. So it's like, okay, if we want to flip Venezuela, we got to go to one of the master chefs. So let's go to Elliot Abrams. Well, he had to get vetted before this committee. And Ilhan Omar brought things up about his time with Iran-Contra and whether or not he'd be qualified to do something in this country without committing another crime, without committing another genocidal act, right?
Wow.
And I don't think he was prepared for that. And I'm like, hats off to her. Because these guys don't get those kinds of questions. They were just, as much as I think Ocasio-Cortez is a pawn in her own way, and I don't really agree with a lot of her stuff, she did something with her little elementary school test where she was asking people about money and finance and passing laws so Congress and the Senate and all these other people can benefit. It was like they had to answer really specific questions about how the game works. So again, I'm not a big fan, but in that moment, I really thought she was doing people a service because she was actually illuminating, this process, this dank process, which she is now part of, by the way. So we'll see how that all plays out. But this is what's happening. So the millennials are starting this beachhead right now. And it's not just in politics. You can also see it in sports. You can see it in the NBA, where LeBron James, who's like the king of millennial athletes, he's changed the face of basketball, right? For better or worse, he's changing things because in the NBA, in sports in general, it was an owner-driven operation. It's always been ownership, right? South Node in Capricorn, that represents ownership. Players now say, I don't want to play for this team. I don't want to have this long contract. Oh, the guys in the NBA, football players, the guys in the NBA get guaranteed contracts. Well, why don't we get guaranteed contracts? So there's this very interesting kind of tidal shift happening in sports.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I think ownership is a little concerned at this point that their contractual hegemony is going to be challenged. And in the NBA, it's kind of like, hey, I want to go play with my buddies over here, okay? And let me just go play with my buddies. Now, on the flip side of that, you sign a contract, and theoretically, you're supposed to honor that contract. But they're starting to change the game a little bit, for better or worse. I think there are some good things. I think there are some things that need to be thought through and worked with and vetted. But I think it's interesting, and I think the energy is good. And we need some deep change every now and then, right? I mean, even just look at, and I'll shut up after this. Even like the Super Bowl, right? You watch the Super Bowl, and who are the ads for in the Super Bowl? Well, they're not really for me. Advertisers are not catering to me. They're catering to you because you're a millennial. They're catering to your generation. So not only product-wise, but style-wise as well. And one of the things that really struck me was that Bud Light made this very intense effort to advertise that they don't have corn syrup in their beer. Right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So millennials have proven that they are not just finicky, but they won't just eat any crap. Like American cheese sales are down with millennials. They're down.
See, and that's a good thing, because that's not even food.
Right. So they're having to wrap their head around this stuff, right? And change. They're having to change, and it's not bad. There's change in the air. I think that's actually really good change. I don't drink Bud Light. In fact, I don't even drink beer. But if I did, I wouldn't want corn syrup in it.
No, and millennials are drinking like fancy craft beers. They're not drinking.
Well, that's it. I mean,
anyway.
Yeah. So Bud Light's trying to capture both markets because they're trying to capture a populist market too, and their theme is for the many, not the few. That's their advertising theme. So they're trying. It's kind of clever because they're trying to capture both worlds. Anyway, I think it's a very interesting time, and we're getting all primed and revved up to get into this Saturn-Pluto conjunction next year, which should be just complete fireworks. It'll be good.
Yeah. It's going to be pretty crazy. Sorry.
You're crazy. Who's that?
It's Jake. Say hi, Jake.
Hey, Jake. Oh, look at him.
Video with us.
Jake
What do you think, guy? What do you think?
Jake should have his own show.
He should have his own show. Stella should have her own show too, but nobody can ever see her because she's too big, so I can't pick her up. Yeah. I'm going to put you down, guy. You got to be quiet. We're doing a show.
Our show's going to the dogs.
Yeah, they've been going crazy. I don't know why. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. Sorry.
You've created a monster now. I want back up there.
I know. Well, now the big one wants up here, and she's 60 pounds.
Yeah.
She's jealous. She wants to be small too. But yeah, so I don't remember even what we're talking about now.
We were talking about the sort of the millennial effect, right?
Oh, okay, yeah, the millennial effect. And how that's kind of changing things with like advertising and all of that. And I think we'll probably see a lot more of that too, because, Uranus is moving into Taurus, and Taurus is consumerism. And so it's changing the way that we're dealing with, manufactured goods and consumerism and the way that we spend our money and we use our resources. And I think that's going to be a push toward buying things that are well made, which we're already seeing with millennials in particular. Like, we don't want just random garbage. We want something that's well made, that's going to last. That's why, boomers get mad at us. We want things that are of value. We don't want just a whole bunch of stuff. Scorpio and all of that. But Uranus and Taurus, I think, is going to change, our complete everything around consumerism.
Well, think of the opposition, Pluto and Scorpio.
Yeah.
So anybody born 1984, 85, you're going to get that first hit of the Uranus opposition to Pluto and Scorpio. And it's going to hit the entire millennial generation. So this Uranian transit opposing Pluto is going to be very interesting because transforming goods, materialism, money, again, for better or worse. I think some of the ideas are good. Some of them, I like a car. I like to drive. I don't want to be driven around. right? Like
Yeah.
that's, I may be an anachronism. But today, as an aside, my mother has knee surgery, she had knee surgery, so I took her to her physical therapy. And I realized that maybe everybody over the age of 80 should have a self-driving car, okay? Like that wouldn't be a bad idea, because today it was a little hairy. So I think some of the ideas are interesting and good.
Mhm.
Like some of the ideas around this new Green Deal, you could pluck maybe 2 or 3 out of there that might be interesting. The rest, it's kind of a bit much, right? So I think we're in a period now where change is going to happen. It is
Mhm.
going to happen. Can we have the change in a way where it's being stewarded in a responsible fashion, where theoretically, and I don't want to use this in a pejorative sense, but just kind of in a allegorical sense, that there's a few adults in the room, right? Like, good idea,
Mhm.
but what if we did this? We'll take a little bit of this. We can't do this. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, but let's try to incorporate. I think that's what we need. I think just to summarily shut millennials out at the gate, I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong. I think there's some really good ideas, some good energy, but there needs to be kind of a meeting of the minds and working through some things. That's my 2 cents.
No, yeah, that makes complete sense. And I I don't agree with what a lot of the millennials are trying to do in general either, because I mean, yeah, a lot of it sort of clashes with my political ideologies.
I look, I agree with you. You and I, that's why we do the show together, right?
Yeah.
Because we vibrate at a similar frequency. But I just think that there are a few things in there that, like the quality of the products and
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
this kind of maker sensibility, and I don't want to eat crap food, and I think these things are, I think we could all kind of resonate with that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
there's more. We could spend a probably whole show doing that, but I feel like the sifting through and filtering and really trying to figure out what kind of culture we want
Mhm.
versus these ideologies and these sides clashing against one another and saying, well, it's got to be this way or it's got to be this way. And I just think that that's patently wrong.
Mhm.
And we got to figure out what kind of culture we want, because whatever America was, that's probably over at this point.
Yeah.
But there are things that were part of that were important,
Mhm.
and maybe bringing a few of those things forward would be really fundamental to incorporate with some of the new ideas that are coming. And nobody has a forum on this, right? I mean, if somebody was like I think Obama had an opportunity. He could have done something like that. He could have
Mhm.
said, "Hey, we've got these new ideas, we've got these older values. I'm the bridge between the two. Let's see if we can have these town halls and put something new together." That didn't happen, and I don't think it's going to happen now, right?
Oh my
Because
gosh. The social
because
climate won't allow for it because of
yeah, no, it
everything
won't.
that has gone down.
Anyway, so I think we have a lot to talk about these eclipses. So let's jump into them.
You mean the full moon or the
Oh,
new
full moon.
moon?
Sorry, the new moon.
We're out
I
of
got
eclipse
eclipse on my
season
brain.
now. But
I got
that, I
eclipse
mean,
on my
that
brain.
was relevant because we missed the Uranus moving into Taurus. That happens on March 2nd, which is just before this new moon, because we didn't do our last video. So we covered a little bit of what we missed last time.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, and now we can get into the new moon, which is happening in Pisces. Can you see it up on my screen?
Yep.
Okay, and so this new moon in Pisces is happening on March 6th, and it's going to be in an exact or almost exact conjunction, just by a few minutes off, with Neptune in Pisces, which is kind of a big deal because this is going to be a very Neptunian sort of new moon experience for a lot of us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. You got that Mercury retrograde that's stationing at 29, the final degree of the zodiac. That's a whole lot of Pisces.
It's all
And
happening all at once too. It's going to be a lot of foggy, confused, and delusional people
well,
running around.
I mean, I like the sextile from Saturn and Pluto.
Yeah, that's helpful to keep us grounded.
There's some great. See, this is what I'm talking about here, because Pisces can be very idealistic, and
Mhm.
can be very grand, very dreamy. It's like, what if, right? What if? And Saturn and Capricorn can really ground this energy, but you have to work for it a little bit, right? That's the nature of a sextile. You gotta make a connection. You got to make a little bit of an effort with a sextile. Once you make the effort, it starts to come easy. And then you've got the Pluto sextile to to all of them as well. And that can be quite transformational. I don't think it's terrible. I actually like this new moon. And that Mercury retrograde, that's really fascinating at 29 degrees.
Mhm.
Yeah, what's your take on that?
Well, to me, it seems like because it's, the end degree of the end sign. So it's like we're getting ready to sort of leave this phase. And like, so there's this energy of like transition, but it's like not fully formed yet. Like we are about to transition into something new. We're about to like go through this period of ending so that way we can sort of move into these new beginnings. But there's like a hesitation. We have to go back. We have to redo things. We have to refine things. We have to make sure that, our plans actually make sense, right? They're not too Neptunian and Piscean. They're not too idealistic and floating off into the ethers, that they're grounded, that they're realistic, that, they're workable in real life. And so I feel like this is a period of this Mercury retrograde where we're going back and refining our energy so that way we can finally let go of something, right, that we've been holding on to and working through for quite some time and move on to something new. And that's the sense that I get because it's the end degree of the end sign, right? So
Yes.
that's kind of the symbolism I see in it.
I think that's pretty solid actually. And when you put Chiron into the mix at
Mm-hmm.
0 degrees, like sort of, at the front of that stellium and that train, to me it feels like we're all wounded in some ways. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Chiron at 0 Aries, we're all wounded, and all of that Piscean energy behind it, to me, represents this vast swath of the collective, because Pisces is the ultimate collective sign. It's got all other 11 signs in it and has such an oceanic and vast potential. Like everybody is a part of this new moon in some way, around feeling vulnerable, or like if you've got a grievance, if you've got a wound, whether you're a man or a woman or so-called black or so-called white or whatever, this new moon could be very interesting for understanding that you're not alone in your suffering.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I'm picking up here.
Absolutely, because it's the sign. It's in the sign of compassion and interconnectedness. So I think that this is a time that we can renew and sort of reinvigorate our compassion for other people. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I really like that for this new moon energy. So that's something that people can sort of seed intentions with, right? Like, how can I be more compassionate? How can I, exercise greater empathy for the people in my life, or the people around me, or people from different political, economic, whatever sort of divisive groups? How does their experience relate to my experience, because it's all connected, right?
Yeah, and I do think with that Saturn-Pluto conjunction sextiling, there's a grounded component to that as well. It's not like you're just saying, "Oh, we're all one." There's like, okay, I kind of know who I am, and I know, sort of where my base or my foundation is to the best of my ability, and I'm willing to incorporate sort of this bigger piece or this bigger picture. So I think the two can work pretty well together. And when you have that, those kinds of decisions and those kinds of insights, I think, are more potent than just saying, "Oh, it's a small world after all."
Yeah.
You get to that point by understanding some very fundamental principles about who you are, where you come from, and really what's important to your life, even just from a survival perspective with Saturn and Capricorn, because we've got to move along the Saturnian kind of moment in time now. So anyway, yeah, I like it. What do you think of the square with Jupiter coming in with the Piscean parade?
I mean, that's always, that's always a little ungrounding. So it's kind of like triggering that aspect that's still, going on this year with Jupiter and square with Neptune, which we talked a little bit about, like when we were off camera with the Jupiter Neptune squared. It's not exact anymore, but it's still in orb, and so it's triggering that energy, which is maybe being a little too idealistic, a little too enthusiastic about something, having expectations that are just beyond what's reasonable. But I do think that Saturn, because it's in such a nice sextile, if you choose to activate that Saturnian energy and choose to see things more realistically and see what you can do practically with these idealistic sort of fantasies and all of that, what can I do with this in real life? If you choose to use that energy, I think it should be okay. But that Jupiter energy is always very, I don't know. I had a hard time with this one because I had Neptune is in opposition with my sun right now, and Jupiter squaring like forming a T-square. So I'm like in this point, like, is this really happening? Am I thinking too big? Is this delusional what I'm trying to do right now? Or is this that's realistic that I can actually accomplish? And so that's something that I, in my own life, have been dealing with this energy. And I think that a lot of people who are affected by this more intensely are probably going through similar circumstances.
Yeah, that's interesting. And for you in particular, you've got your sun in Virgo with this Neptune opposition in Pisces. And I think it's actually a good aspect for you, because if you have that really grounded Virgo energy, which you totally do, I think you can reach for the rose with Neptune opposing your sun, right? I mean, I think it's part of the deal. And so if there are Virgos out there experiencing that, you just want to ground your energy and work and stay healthy and keep your feet on the ground and be of service. And I think that the Neptunian portal opens up, and I believe you're rewarded for that. And sort of this divine process of reciprocity. It happens. There's actually there's an esoteric principle called the law of balance interchange, and that's where it happens along that line. Conversely, I have to bring this up. Jussie Smollett has his sun at 29 Gemini, and it's opposed his natal Neptune, in Sagittarius. So he has the Neptune Sun opposition in his chart, and we're seeing the opposite effect of that. We're seeing like the delusion and some of the the Neptunian fog and theater that's actually going on with him, because it's very ungrounded. He's born at 29 Gemini. So I mean, I'm not putting you up as an example with Jussie Smollett, but I guess I am. But I think ultimately, if anybody has Neptune opposition with their sun in their chart or is going through it, you just got to ground your sun in the best way, shape, or form possible, and then you can, I think, move towards that kind of Neptunian sense of promise and potential. And it's like, yeah, not a bad thing. Yeah.
And like, if you do have that, like how I do too, you have Saturn trining your sun at the same time, right? So that's the thing that's been, I feel like, my saving grace with all this. Like I have that grounded energy coming in, and anyone who has, Virgo sun at the middle degrees or moon or ascendant or whatever, and is being impacted in this way, you have actually Saturn as your saving grace right now, where normally people are like cursing Saturn, like, darn you, Saturn, bringing all these challenges and lessons. It's like, thank you, Saturn, for helping me to keep my feet on solid ground so I can see things realistically and I can do something real with this energy, right?
Right.
And that's the energy of this new moon. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I'm psyched about this new moon. What do you think of this Venus square to Uranus?
Well, okay. So that's going to come probably a few days before this, right? So it's not exact in this. Venus square to Uranus, I've actually had positive experiences with this in my own life and with my clients and things like that. I think it's going to be a good time to explore just exciting new things in relationship with other people, exploring dealing with relationship and the way that you interrelate with people in new, different ways, thinking outside the box, connecting with people, especially that you normally wouldn't connect with or think to connect with. That's a really good way to use that energy of Uranus, squaring or this, Venus square Uranus. But on the flip side, it can bring disruption to relationships. If you're in a relationship or you're in a contract or agreement with someone where it's too tightly bound up, where it's too limited and restrictive, then this is a time period, especially around this new moon, where you might feel a little frustrated with that. And you might, need to shake things up and change something, or something, the way that Uranus works, something might come in from the outside and change it for you.
Right.
So people in the fixed signs, especially, first degrees of the fixed signs, will be feeling that and that need to. And also this could be bringing changes that can help to bring you back into balance and equilibrium later on too.
Yeah. 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 I think that, yeah, absolutely. On a personal level, people have this potential to interact with people that are outside of their comfort zone, or, So, I think maybe the best thing to do would be take a millennial to lunch. There you go.
Okay.
Take a millennial. No, I'm just kidding. I think also with Venus and Aquarius, it's about our relationship to things that represent like collective ideas,
Mm-hmm.
because Aquarian is this it's the collective energy. So we've got this ongoing debate around, socialism, social democracy. This is, to me, this is, Venus and Aquarius, our relationship to that thing, and it's squaring off against Uranus, and it's like,
Oh, yeah.
again, what works, what doesn't work. Now Bernie Sanders has just announced that he's going to run for president, and he's the old guard of the Social Democrats. So this could be an energy of conflict, with this Venus Uranus square, and you may see people vehemently reject some of these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if this debate around things like, single payer and free college tuition for all, and all the bells and whistles that go along with this kind of social program, if it's going to run into some kind of conflict around this time, because it feels like it's kind of headed in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like we're dealing with this sort of atomization of these ideologies that are being presented to us in a way that they'll clash. So that'll be interesting to watch.
No, that makes sense, because there has been a lot of energy around those themes, so that absolutely could come to fruition. Yeah, that's interesting. So what do you think about, so the other thing that's going on here, I think we touched on it a little bit, but I kind of want to get your take on it a little bit more, because you're real good with Chiron. And so on a more mundane level, right, what would you say about this Chiron conjunction to Mercury, while Mercury is stationing to go retrograde? How is that going to affect us a little bit more collectively?
Well, yeah, I feel that Chiron and Aries has a lot to do with men
Mm-hmm.
and male energy. And I've been talking about this for a while now. And now that it's fully back into Aries and won't be retrograding into Pisces, these ideas about wounded men and vulnerable men and men who are, you know, uh, doing their best to figure out how to be men, in many instances, not even having been raised by men. I think
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be a really big theme with Chiron and Aries. And it feels to me like Mercury conjuncting Chiron has the potential of, maybe being not so dismissive about the fact. Like, I'll give you an example. I believe it was Esquire that just did a story, a cover story on a 16-year-old white male. Okay. Like, what's it like to be a 16-year-old white male in high school?
Mm-hmm.
And you would think, well, come on, this is not a story, but it is a story, especially because, of what we saw with the Covington situation and what's going on in high schools across the country, whatever that whole Parkland thing was. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a story there, and being a 16-year-old white male in America in 2019 is very different than being a 16-year-old white male in 1979 or 1989 or even 1999 for that matter. This is a very different time. So that story was derided. It was like, oh, come on, it smacks of white privilege. Jamel Hill, who was writing for ESPN, and she had her show on ESPN canceled because she was too radical. The ESPN gave her a platform, and she got too radical for the general, sports viewer. They jumped the shark. They were trying to create programming for a demographic that didn't exist for that program. But they tried to do it. They tried to be politically correct, and she derided that piece, and it was like, oh, come on, why is this so special? Give me a break. Well, there's something to it. There's a story there, and I feel like this Chiron Mercury conjunction has the potential to dissolve into this kind of frame of reference where, whether it's men who are in their middle age or younger, it comes into this Chiron and Aries wound. And can Mercury and Pisces be more forgiving, or sit down and move away from the bias and listen? It reminds me of the woman who directed that movie, The Red Pill. And she went in as a very kind of hardcore and staunch feminist. And she talked to men. And after the film was over, her script had flipped, right?
Yeah.
She saw these guys as being, not the enemy. They were not the target. They were not the monsters that in her imagination and in modern media had created this kind of fiction around. And I feel like this Mercury conjunction has some of that potential. And it is retrograde, so maybe it has the possibility of having people rethink or reevaluate their position around men. And I'll tell you the other thing, and I'll toss this back to you. I had this interesting connection with this woman on one of my streams, and she said she, quote unquote, used to be a feminist, and she flipped the script, and she began to see things differently. And maybe there's something also here, and it's not just about men, but it's about women who have they recontextualize their energy to make it more manifest in a male fashion. And maybe there's a realization that might be kind of a synthetic kind of direction that they've taken on in their lives. And that they may rethink other components about what it is to be a woman and what it is to have feminine energy and to not be so socially and culturally reflexive. So it's not just about men, but I think there's some potential here for that, because it feels to me like the tide is turning a bit. It's not the first person, by the way, that I've encountered that has had that kind of epiphany. So again, we're not alone.
Yeah, no, and that's reflective of, I know a lot of women who used to be feminists and who no longer identify as that for similar reasons to what you just said, myself included. I don't know if you know this, but when I was an undergrad, I got my, this might be kind of funny too, I got my minor in women, gender, and social justice.
Holy smokes.
So that was me when I was, 18, 19 years old. I decided that was going to be my minor in college. And I feel very differently about a lot of those things that I
So, okay, I want to ask you a question.
About back then.
So why did you choose that?
Well, because I saw that there is an issue where women and men are treated differently in our society, and women have had historically a harder go of it, right? And so that was something that I was very passionate about. But I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but I didn't like what I was seeing when I was in that realm and when I was connecting with people who were, social justice warriors and things like that, because I didn't feel like they were fighting for the right things. And I do agree with you. It's kind of like, so feminism was, of course, sort of co-opted, and it was turned into something that was not originally what I think it was intended to be. And part of what it was turned into was this like energy of masculinizing women, right? Making women act as if they were men and competing with men in the workforce and being more manly, really being more masculine, right? And I don't think necessarily that's the right way for everyone. And so, there was a period of time where people, even nowadays, in the feminist groups, are demonized for being mothers and, wanting to be stay-at-home housewives and things like that. What if that's your dharma? What if that's what you want to do? What if that's how you express your feminine power? Like, how dare you? Feminism is supposed to be about, or what I thought it was supposed to be about, is empowering women to do whatever they want to do because it's their passion, it's their choice, and they can, they have the right to do that. And so to shame some women for doing things that are stereotypically feminine and then praise others for doing things that are stereotypically masculine, I don't think that serves anyone. I think that's just making everyone masculine. And then you're shaming men for being masculine. None of it makes any sense. I think the point should be that everybody should be free to be whoever they want to be and do whatever they want to do in whatever form that takes, right? And so I wasn't seeing that. I was seeing a lot of infighting and a lot of people trying to tell people how they should act and be based on gender norms or being the opposite of gender norms or whatever. And it got ridiculous. So that's what I saw. And I don't say that every feminist is like this. I don't think that this isn't, across the board. Just in general, I didn't like being a part of that world. It went against my values, which I value personal freedom, right? I'm like a libertarian anarchist. I think everybody should have as much personal freedom as they possibly can to choose what they want to choose and be who they want to be. And that's what I thought feminism was. And I found out that in this day and age, especially in college and in college courses, that's not what they're drilling into your mind.
Right. And then we get into the social programming and indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is probably, I think if the millennials are going to really do some system busting, ultimately, I think that's where it needs to go, through the social programming
Mm-hmm.
cycle, because we cannot develop as organic beings with these artificial programs,
Mm-hmm.
that are essentially being constructed so that we can fit into the next social model that the engineers, want us to fit into, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, no, it's like the idea should be theoretically to develop the mindset that you ultimately came to.
Mm-hmm.
Develop, like, well, what do I want to do? What is going to make sense? And what if I choose something that's contrary to the curriculum? And if I choose something that's contrary to the curriculum, can I be supported in that? Because I've thought through things and this doesn't feel right for me, or this doesn't make sense for me, but this does. And in many cases on campuses across America today, you will be shut down for that,
Yeah.
because that's not part of the social program or the model. So, hey, props, kudos to you. That's your Pluto and your ascendant.
I'm going to get some weird comments on this video, I'm sure. I just went
That's
on like a
okay.
rant.
That's okay. You're getting about 11,000 people now. So you've got about, 500 comments to burn, I think, at this point. That's great. You're doing awesome, by the way. You're doing just great.
Oh, thank you. It's going well so far. And people are usually really nice to me in the comment section, even when I say stuff that I feel like is going to be controversial.
They're not always nice when I show up, though. I think I push a few buttons every now and then.
Sometimes, but they need that. People need to feel offended sometimes.
It's okay. Yeah, right. They feel comfortable a little bit. So you want to look at the full moon? You want to check that out?
Yeah, let's change subjects now. Let me share the other thing. Okay, so we have full moon. Okay, is this the full moon?
Yeah.
Okay, you can see that?
Yes.
Okay, so there's not a whole lot happening between the new moon and full moon. It's like a lot of Mercury retrograde. Mars is going to trine Saturn and Pluto leading up to the full moon, which I think is going to be really nice. Mars trine Saturn is always really great for connecting your ambitions to like hard work, working really diligently toward your goals, having the energy to do it, sticking to your actions and your plans, and all those wonderful things. And Mars is really nice with Pluto as well. That's really hyper focused energy and attention on something. So I mean that's all going to be really great, and that's going to be still part of this full moon experience here. But this full moon is interesting because we had a Chiron activation with the new moon, right? With Mercury conjunct Chiron. And then with the full moon, we have the sun, which a full moon, for everyone who doesn't know, is when this moon is in opposition to the sun. The sun is in conjunction to Chiron. The full moon is opposition to Chiron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the can't we all get along full moon. Can't we all just get along? This is the Rodney King full moon right here. Because Libra wants to be friendly. Libra wants to be balanced and equitable and fair, right? So it's a very fair moon. It's like a shining example of fairness. And the Sun Chiron conjunction is very intense. It's a very intense conjunction. To me, this has something to do with dealing with sort of the repercussions of a heavy-handed nature. This is like this the word that just pops into my mind, and I don't like to use the word because it has a lot of pejorative or associations, is bullying. Like, to me, the Sun Chiron conjunction is kind of heavy-handed. It's like an overreach. Like there's an overcompensatory kind of value, because Chiron is wounded and the sun is going to light that thing up, right? And the moon, in opposition to that, is trying to find some kind of balance or fairness or the ability to make peace with a situation that is over amplified. To me, this is also very like conflict oriented energy from like a global perspective. I mean, this is a light the fuse kind of moment with the Sun Chiron conjunction. And there's the moon. Like, whatever happened to diplomacy? Diplomacy just went the way of I don't know, the beeper, right? I mean, it's just gone. So when you get a situation like what's happening in Venezuela, there's no diplomacy. There's either Maduro or there's Guaido, and there's no like, hey, we're gonna go down there and we're gonna talk to this Maduro guy, and we're gonna try to create a bridge and have some kind of a real diplomatic kind of relationship with this country. That doesn't happen anymore. It's either regime change or nothing now, right? But this moon in opposition with Sun Chiron does have a bit of a diplomatic feel to it, and it's and even if the only thing about, well, it's kind of a wide conjunction, I'm sorry, wide square, but
Yeah.
the square to Jupiter, that's like peace at any price. It's
Mm-hmm.
like go along to get along, peace at any, and that kind of stance, and we all encounter that, because we get into this wheelhouse where either it hits our trauma buttons, or we're exhausted, or we just don't want to be bothered.
Mm-hmm.
We will make concessions in the moment that will have repercussions in the future. And this is kind of a peace at any price square, but it's a very interesting chart. The Sun Chiron conjunction, to me, that's a fuse that's about to be lit. It's pretty intense. That's how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it does make sense too, like just diplomacy with like foreign countries, very literally the T square. That could be part of it too.
We'll see. It doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. It's
Well, there
like,
could be an expectation for it, right? Because it's a square from Jupiter, and the expectation doesn't meet what actually is realistic nowadays, right?
yeah, it's not realistic because our system has been infected, and that's a whole other discussion, a whole other show.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no place for diplomacy anymore. It's all been about regime change since 2000, year 2000, and even a little bit before that during the Clinton administration. Regime change city. But yeah, no, I think I like the Grand Trine. I think the
Yeah.
Grand Trine is great, and it's grounded. You got a moon trine to Saturn, a moon trine to Pluto, right? Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's activating that Mars activity with Saturn and Pluto that we were just talking about too.
Yeah, no, I like that, and that drive that you were talking about
Mm-hmm.
with the Mars Saturn trine, and the moon is interesting because like you could have Mars Saturn and be driven and have lots of endurance,
Mm-hmm.
but the moon actually adds emotional content. So there's like an artistic element here. So I like that. It's not like just worker production for
Mm-hmm.
the sake of worker production, but there's emotion. There's emotion that's a part of this, and Libra's pretty creative. So I do like this trine a lot. Yeah. And it's like, make art, not war. And that's kind of how I see this.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because this is the equinox at the same time as like a full moon, so it's like a new beginning and a culmination point happening simultaneously. And it's sort of like the energy, obviously, of Aries versus Libra is focusing on the self versus the other, and relationship and all of that. And so this could be coming back into balance between those two areas as well, and focusing on your own needs, your own self-interest, your own ego identity, and having to look at the needs of other people and care for others in your life as well. And so I kind of like that energy of it. It's an interesting energy for an equinox, I think.
Right. I agree. And it sets the tone from the equinox to the solstice.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the equinoctial template
Yeah.
for the following 3 months until we go through another change, which will happen in June. I do like the trine with the Jupiter and Uranus, which we've been talking about and playing with now for a couple of months, and there's a lot of acceleration taking place at the same time. So if you're stuck, if people are stuck, there's a lot of opportunity to get unstuck right now, and to think about your situation from a different perspective. Get outside the box, see yourself differently. That to me has always been a hallmark of the Jupiter-Uranus trine, as I've experienced it. So, yeah. What about what else we have going on? We've
Well,
got Jupiter. Go
Venus
ahead.
is making some real like tight aspects. It's making a square to Mars and a sextile to Jupiter at the same time. So Venus is getting, and Venus is the ruler of this full moon, right? Venus is the ruler of Libra. The full moon's in Libra. So,
That's right.
yeah. And so we have that Venus Mars
Oh,
square.
that's almost exact, isn't it? The
It is
Venus.
almost exact.
Yeah.
I think it comes exact on that day. Now that I'm looking at that. So that's always, a lot of real like passionate, heated energy.
The Venus-Mars square can be very passionate for sure.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that Taurus is like really like, body. It's like body energy.
Mm-hmm.
And Aquarius is really head energy.
Yeah.
It's like, get out of your head, like if you're in a relationship and it's just too heady and you process too much, like this Venus Mars square is like, get out of your head,
Mm-hmm.
go do something, go on a mud run together or something like that. Right. Like challenge yourselves to become kind of, more primal or more sensual, and not what's the word I'm looking for? Not so idealistic in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
because Venus in Aquarius. Well, Venus in Aquarius is kind of kooky too.
Yeah.
It's kind of kooky. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of detached, right? And like a little
Yeah.
voyeuristic. It's not as intimate as Mars, which is in the sign of Taurus, right? Which is like really sensual and sensory.
Yeah.
It's like wanting to touch people and hug them and,
Right. So
feel things. Whereas
that's
Venus
true.
in Aquarius wants to detach themselves and sort of, not get close in that way.
Yeah, Venus in Aquarius wants to psychoanalyze things, I think, in some ways.
Yeah.
So instead of doing just a mud run together, do a naked mud run together.
Yes.
There you go.
That's a perfect solution.
Naked mud run.
A naked mud run. Or,
right.
a naked run in like a pile of like pudding or something, because it's like Taurus.
Maybe you could do that afterwards, and then you have to get to clean each other off, and then you and then you can lick each other off. There you go. You're taking this into a whole
This is getting out of hand.
It's Venus in Aquarius. I'm sorry, I'm channeling it.
This whole video has gotten out of hand.
This is good. No, we need to see. This is what happens when I do this from California, because I have Uranus relocated on my ascendant here.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So you get the wild card when I come to California. In Texas, I'm like,
It's getting crazy.
I'm Mr. Like, oh, you got to do this, got to do this. Now here it's a little more loose. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I think the square to Mars is you have the potential to put passion back in your relationship. If you're lacking passion in a relationship, I think it could be very, very good for that. Sometimes it can be argumentative. Sometimes Venus-Mars squares can be good makeup sex. So, that does happen. Mm-hmm. And then the sextile to Jupiter, I mean, it's like, what kind of relationship do you want? That's the other thing, because you get into like this kind of idealism with Jupiter.
Yeah.
The idea, like, what kind of relationship do you want? What works? What kind of belief systems?
Yeah.
Or philosophies can two people begin to adopt so they can grow closer together? Because I think those things are very important in a relationship.
Yeah, I think this would be a good time to look at your relationships and see, which ones fit with your integrity and with your, own moral and ethical value systems, and which ones maybe don't. And the ones that don't might be the ones that are coming into conflict with that square, right? So that could be part of it too.
Yeah. I totally, yes. And then what else do we have? We've got Jupiter squaring off against Mercury and Neptune. I don't think Jupiter squares are bad per se. Mm-hmm. I think if anything, they can be a little bit like overdone, or they can be sort of. It's like staying for one course too long at Golden Corral. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That was a bit. Okay. I know. I had to go there though. Okay. Anyway.
I'm a millennial. I don't eat at Golden Corral.
I don't go there either. But it's Uranus. I got to blame it on Uranus. Okay. But I think Jupiter squares are not bad. It's kind of like anything worth doing is worth over. And it's like, hold on. It's like the road to excess leads to the palace of wisdom. That's like a Jupiter square. And so you find out like how much is too much, and you could reel it back in. Yeah, okay, I know where the limit is, and I can stay within this boundary and still get something out of this.
I agree. That makes a lot of sense. And that's definitely the energy of Jupiter when it's in square. Sometimes you do a little too much, you got to rein it back in. That's all. It's usually nothing like horrible. At least not in my experience.
Yeah, the one thing I would say though about this one square, because of the conjunction with Neptune, is you have to tell the truth during this period. Like
Oh yeah.
if you
The
don't tell the
Mercury
truth,
Neptune conjunction, that's
yeah,
going to be a lot of deception, and Mercury stationing
yeah.
it to go direct just a little bit after this in a conjunction with Neptune on the 28th.
If you're not telling the truth either to yourself or to other people around this time, you can get your butt kicked.
Yeah.
It will definitely come back to you. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's going to be important. And I think, looking at more of the global level and, the social sort of scene, I think that that's a time when we're going to be dealing with a lot of like lies and deception and, probably from the media and all of that, Mercury ruled, Mercury ruled stuff. I mean, that's not anything that's abnormal, but I think it's going to be a little bit more overt around that time. Like we could be lied to in a very sort of in your face way. And there could be a lot of confusion around information.
Yeah, I think so. I think we should keep our eye on the pharmaceutical industry right around this time, and what comes out around, either drugs that have had terrible test trials, or drugs that have had a deleterious effect, and then cover-ups. We need to keep our eye on cover-ups around this area, because I think some of that stuff's going to start to happen. The ball is rolling on stuff like Roundup, and the ball is rolling on fluoride, and at some point it's gonna roll on vaccines. I just know it. It's gonna happen. So to me, this feels like truth coming up and bubbling up, and then spin jobs potentially, and keep your eye on the pharmaceutical industry with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talked about this before with the Jupiter Neptune square, like expanding on energy around like things like poisons, right? That's Neptune, and pharmaceuticals and doctors and hospitals. These are all Neptunian things. So there could be a lot of conflicting or confusing information coming out around all of that. So yeah, I think that's spot on.
Yeah, the fight for scientific proof is on, because you'll always have one side that has so-called scientific evidence. You have another side that has so-called scientific evidence. So there's this clash of like studies, and I mean, it's really interesting to watch, but it's also very frustrating.
It is very frustrating, yeah. And it's frustrating a lot of the time because most people don't know how to actually read and review like scientific research appropriately. And so they're just misinformed. They think that they're reading something and that this study is valid, and they use that as a source of information to like yell at people over the internet when most people don't actually know how to do that properly. And so that's why we're getting, two sides to everything. That's why we have all this information that's saying one thing and then all this information that seems to be contradicting it at the same time. And it's very easy to confuse people because it's not easy to read through that type of research. Not everybody's trained to be able to do something like that. And every random person with Google thinks that they are right now. So that makes it even harder.
Right. Unless you understand the variables and the vectors and the control groups, you can't really have a solid grasp or understanding about, one trial or one study versus the other. Because that's where the information gets manipulated, through the variables, the vectors, and the control groups. And you sort it out, and all of a sudden you can see one group has controlled something so they can get an outcome, and the other group is probably larger in its scope in terms of what they're actually researching. And you may find that, there may be more validity over here because they wanted to rig the results over here. And that happens all the time. It
Yeah, the
happens all
study
the time.
design is just like nonsensical, and then
Yeah.
people read the results instead of actually reading the methods and everything that actually happened in the results, or the discussion, instead of reading the results and the methods and all that. And then the discussion, that's just what the researchers are inferring from the methods and the results, and that's their opinion, which is usually biased, which is usually based on what they have to say sometimes in order to get published as well. So there's a lot that goes into all of that. But we're kind of like off on we're going in weird directions today.
It's okay. It's circular. We're circular. We're coming back. We come back to the center, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where's the center here? Where are we going?
Well, I think summing up the energy for this full moon, which is going to be on the equinox, is I think there's some really really positive energy here, especially if you want to build something or create something. So you have some fortitude, some stick-to-itiveness, and infuse it with some emotional content. I think that's a real win here. I think there's, again, with the Jupiter-Uranus trine, there's acceleration and things happening very quickly. And then there's some conflicts to work out. Don't make a concession or peace at any price. That's never a really, whether it's in a relationship or I'll take this job because, fill in the blank, right? No, sometimes you have to do it, but there are other times when you want to be more selective. And then we got the squares to, there's one more square here, and it's, what do we got? Is it the Saturn square to Uranus? Is that it? No.
Yeah, that's a pretty wide square, but
Yeah.
it's actually, it looks like it's more like Pluto that's in the
Yeah.
orb.
Yeah.
Saturn's
So,
just out of orb.
yeah. Anyway, I feel like that there's really good energy here. And from the collective point of view, though, that Chiron Sun conjunction is hot. It's very hot. It's a fuse that I feel like is going to be lit.
All right. Well, I feel like that's a good note to kind of sign off on. What do you think?
I think so. I think it's a very good note, and I had fun today.
Yeah, me too. Now I'm
Well,
nervous to upload this, but
well, I hope everybody else has a little bit of fun with us, because sometimes it gets a little too heavy out there, and
yeah.
we need to light it up.
Man,
Hey,
I'm
Matt.
See, this video is chaos, Robert. It's Mercury retrograde.
It's my Uranus on the ascendant.
Yeah.
Relocated. Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll see you again next month.
Absolutely. Bye for now.
Bye.